In this chapter, we're going to look at topics related to measurement. In this lesson, we're going to focus on units of measurement. All right, hi everybody. So we're going to start a unit now on measurement. Okay, and we're going to start off that unit by looking at units of measurement. And I think that probably stands to reason here. So, first of all, measurement is the process of describing the relative size of an object using different measurement units. Now, we are going to focus probably fairly heavily on distance, okay, length measurements and whatnot, as opposed to volume and those sorts of things. But the relationships or the ideas are still going to be pertinent for all of those as well. Okay, so a few common measuring devices, again, for measuring distance here, we're going to use ruler, measuring tape, yard stick or a meter stick, and a trundle wheel. Now, sometimes some people might not be familiar with that. That's one of those things where you see the guys out in the field and they're kind of holding like they hold their little thing like this, and then they ride along the ground, and there's the wheel that rolls out, and they're using that to measure distances. If they're longer than let's say like a meter stick or something like that. Using the right tool is important. Okay, if you're trying to, for example, use a ruler. Let's say a ruler that's like this size right here. Okay, which is only about 15 centimeters long here, to measure the length of a hallway. Well, every time you put this down and move it over, you're going to introduce a little bit of error, and that's going to make this a very inaccurate measurement here. So you got to use the right tool. You'd want to use a trundle wheel for something like that. Now, so there are two types of measurement systems that are used throughout the world. We've got the metric system, which is primarily what we use in Canada, although we're making a transition because there's also the imperial system. So in terms of units, if you want to think of it like that, right, the imperial system, we talk about measuring distances in inches, feet, and yards and miles. Whereas in the metric system, we're going to use centimeters, meters, kilometers, and so on. Okay? There are perks to the metric system. I'll throw that out there because the conversions are quite simple. Okay, really, it's just a matter of moving the decimal point on a number. The imperial system goes back to some traditional ways of measuring things, so we come by that quite naturally. But the truth is, it's a little bit more awkward to do conversions there. Now, in Canada, we're sort of stuck between these two systems. Okay, a lot of us still think of ourselves in terms of, like, when we measure our height, we're still thinking feet and inches. We're still using pounds and whatnot, but at the same time, if you go out and you buy a drink, that drink is probably going to be measured. Its volume is going to be measured in terms of milliliters. So the metric system. If you ask somebody, how far away certain cities are, we're going to use kilometers. Actually, who am I kidding? In Canada, we don't talk like that. If you ask somebody how far away a city is, they're going to tell you how many hours it's going to take to get there. Canada is just so big. We measure distances between cities in terms of hours, not in terms of kilometers. But if you were to push somebody to give you a distance, they'd probably give it to you in terms of kilometers. So we are kind of stuck between those two systems. So it's important for us to be somewhat fluent in both. Now, the metric system is also known as the SI system, which it stands for this French name here, so Le Système International des Units. It's used by most countries, including Canada. It's developed in France in 1791, and it's used to standardize those measurements. So what happens is somewhere in France, there is actually a meter stick. Okay, it's a stick with a little notch on it, and sorry, that length there is the meter. Now, because those sorts of things change if they get warm or they get cooler or whatever, it's not as precise as we'd like it to be. So even though they hold the meter stick in a very special place where they control temperature and whatnot, there has been a move in the last few years towards measuring, for example, the meter in terms of units that won't ever change. There's a certain number of wavelengths of a color of light that they use now, okay, just to standardize that. Because that meter stick in France, that, like I said, you change the temperature, the pressure, whatever, you can slightly change that length there, and that's not useful. We need something that we can standardize, where everybody knows exactly what we're referring to. Anyway, for most of us, we don't need our measurements to be that exact. We live our whole lives without worrying too much about how quote-unquote exact our measurements are. But in the sciences and engineering, well, that's a little bit different. You got to be careful here. Now, before measuring tools were created, okay, often people used common objects, I should say, as a point of reference when estimating measurement here. And so we're going to talk about these things called a referent. So when we're trying to estimate, for example, the width of something or the length of something, we've got these fairly common reference that we can use to kind of help us get a sense of the dimensions here. So, for example, we might use the thickness of a dime to approximate a millimeter. Now, it's not perfect, but it gives you a pretty good sense of what that is. So if you have a few dimes around, you could use those to measure something, and that would give you a pretty good estimation of how many millimeters wide or thick it is. The width of your pinky finger, okay, is about 1 centimeter. Now, I happen to have a ruler right here. So there's 1 centimeter. So let's just take a look. That's okay. That's close. My pinky finger is a little fatter than that. My pinky finger, is about, what is that, like 1.7 centimeters or so. But anyway, width of a pinky finger. The hand width is about 1 decimeter. Now, 1 decimeter is 10 centimeters. So here we go. There's 10 centimeters. If I put my hand there, yeah, that's relatively close, actually. The width of my hand is pretty close to 10 centimeters. Okay, maybe closer to 11 there, but that's pretty close here. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you this here, but the height of a standard doorknob on a door is about 1 meter, and the height of a standard doorway is roughly 2 meters. And if you're just walking, just your average person walking around here, it'll take you about 15 minutes or so to walk a kilometer. Or it's about 8 city blocks, okay? Now, these vary based on the person, okay? The height of the standard doorknob really won't change that much. But anyway, it just gives you an idea here. But like, for example, the distance and the pinky finger and the hand width, those are going to vary depending on the person that's giving those measurements there. So you can see why there's a little bit of error that gets worked in here, but we're typically using reference when we're making estimates, not precise measurements there. So that's okay. That's okay. Now, when we talk about the metric system specifically, okay, when we're talking about length or linear units here are the units that we typically use. The meter here, this is our base unit. Okay, so the rest of these measurements are based off of the meter. So when we talk about a decameter, deca means 10, so 10 meters. Hecto means 100, 100 meters. Kilo is 1,000 meters. But on the when we go the other direction here, deci means a tenth. So a tenth of a meter. Centi is 100th. Okay, 100th of a meter. So this up here, let's go like this. It means 10 times. This is 100 times. This is 1,000 times. But this is 1/10 times, 100th times, and milli is 1,000th. So 1,000th times. Okay, and that's what the K, H, D, A, D, C, and M stand for. And if you were to move over and talk about volume, talk about like liters, milliliters, and whatnot, talk about mass, kilograms, grams, decigrams, whatever, we have the exact same relationship amongst those measurements as well. And that's one of the things that makes the metric system so useful. Once you know the prefixes here, it doesn't matter what you're measuring, okay, the relationships are going to stay the same. So to convert down here, To convert between units, we simply move the decimal the number of times in the same direction as it takes to go from the unit you're converting from to the unit you're converting to. Or one way I like to think about it here, when your unit, let's say up here, let's put it up here. When you're converting, if your unit gets big, or gets bigger, we should say, the number gets smaller. And now, just to give you an idea of how that works here, if I'm measuring the distance between here and, let's say, the closest McDonald's, just throw that out here. If I'm going to measure that in centimeters, I'm going to have this huge number of centimeters between me and the nearest McDonald's. But if you measure that in terms of kilometers, that number is going to be a lot smaller because the unit that we're using is a lot bigger. That unit covers a lot of those centimeters. So, anyway, that just gives you an idea here. Let's go through and actually do some questions right now. Okay, so here we're going to just do the following metric conversions here. So I want to convert, for example, 29.7 kilometers to decimeters. Now, I'm going to walk through this a couple of different ways here. Notice that I'm going from a big unit to a small unit, which means my number, the number that I'm using here, should get larger. Now, that corresponds to what I've got over here. If I'm going to go from kilometers to decimeters, and notice I'm starting with big units and we're going down to the small units. Okay, if I'm going from here to here, that's a jump from kilometers is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 units to the right. I am going to move my decimal here 4 units to the right. So that's going to be 29. So I'm going to move it 7, and then 1, 2, 3. So 3 spaces after that. So what is that? 297,000 decimeters and 29.7 kilometers. In this next one, B, I'm going to go from kilometers to centimeters. This is an even bigger jump. So big unit to small unit, my number's going to get larger. That means my decimal's going to move to the right. And I can see that here too. To go from kilometers to centimeters, I'm going to move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. Remember, and I know we kind of mentioned it above here, but just to say it again, every time we jump here, it's going to be this multiple or this divisor of 10. Okay, it's always about 10 here. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to move the decimal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.7 centimeters. To go from 134 millimeters to hectometers, in this case, I'm going from a small unit to a large unit. That means my number's got to get smaller. Okay? So how does that work? So if I'm going from millimeters to hectometers, I'm going to move the decimal to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. So if I don't see the decimal, that means it's at the end of the number here. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, so 0.00134 hectometers. Here, 50.505 millimeters. I'm going to convert that to meters. I'm going from small unit to large unit, so the decimal's going to move to the left. The number's got to get smaller. And from millimeters to meters, that's 1, 2, 3. So my decimal is going to move 3 to the left. So 1, 2, 3. So 0.050505 meters. Next, 852 meters to kilometers. So I'm going from small unit to large unit. Okay. So again, my number's going to get smaller. The decimal's going to move to the left. To go from meters to kilometers, that's 1, 2, 3 steps along that line. So 3 to the left, so that's what I'm going to do. I don't see the decimal, which means it's at the end of the number. So 1, 2, 3. So my answer here is going to be 0.852 kilometers. Let's take a look at this one. 13 centimeters. We're going to convert that to decameters. So I'm going from small unit to large. That means my number's got to get smaller. the decimal's got to move that way. This is a nice one, though, because, it's the same as the other ones here, I should say. From centimeters to decameters, it's going to be 1, 2, 3 steps. So I don't see the decimal. It's got to be after the number. I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 to the left. Meters to millimeters. This time I'm going from a large unit to a small unit. So because the unit's getting smaller, the number's got to get bigger, which means I got to move the decimal that way. I got to move the decimal to the right. And again, my chart kind of confirms that. To go from meters to millimeters, I go 1, 2, 3 to the right. So there's my decimal right there. I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 to the right. So 5, 2, 1, and then there's this extra spot opening up the 0. So 5,210 millimeters. Hectometer to decimeter. Okay, the unit is getting smaller, so the number's got to get bigger. So once again, the decimal's got to move to the right there. So from hectometer to decimeter, that's 1, 2, 3. So down here, I'm going to take that decimal and I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 to the right. So 4, 7, and then there's 2 spaces there that opens up. So 4,700 decimeters. Centimeters to millimeters, I'm going from, well, it's not a large unit, but it's a larger unit. Larger unit to smaller unit. So the number's got to get larger, but from centimeters to millimeters, that's just a movement of 1. So the decimal's going to move 1 over. So 2.7 centimeters is simply 27 millimeters. And now finally, our last one here, we're going to go from kilometers to hectometers. So again, we're going from a large unit to a smaller unit. It's not a small unit, but it's smaller than a kilometer. Okay, so the number's going to get larger. To go from a kilometer to a hectometer, that's just a movement 1 over. So the decimal here is going to move from in front of the 3 to just behind it. So this will become 3.15 hectometers. Okay, and that's how you do those conversions when we're talking about just linear conversions in the metric system. Okay, now we're going to take a moment here. We're going to talk about what happens when you, I'm going to focus that, when you convert between area units, which really just amount to the linear units being squared. Okay, so a kilometer squared, a hectometer squared, and so on. So because in the process of calculating area, you multiply the units together, what really happens here is we sort of do this conversion twice, in a sense here. I don't want you to like do a conversion twice here, but I'll show you what I mean, because we can simplify this down here. When you're dealing with square units, the rules are the same as linear units, but you double the number of times you move the decimal. Okay? So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to kind of follow along with how I do this, following this chart. So I'll show you just a second here, but what we're going to do is we're going to move it here. So for example, to go from 3 centimeters squared to meters squared, because the unit is getting larger, the number must get smaller. Now, the jump, if I go to the previous one over here, the jump from centimeters to meters is 2. So I would normally, if it was just centimeters to meter, I would move the decimal 2 to the left. But here, when I change this, when I go from centimeters squared to meters squared, it's like I do this. I go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Every time I do it, I take into account the 2 dimensions. So I'm going to convert, like centimeters to decimeters is like centimeters to decimeters. Like do it once, do it twice. And then to meters, and then to meters. So here, to go from centimeters to meters, that's 2 steps. I'm going to move the decimal 4 places. So if the decimal is right here, I'm going to move that 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0.1, 2, 3 zeros in front. If we go from 2.7 centimeters squared to millimeters squared, okay, because I'm going from bigger unit to smaller unit, the number should get larger. So I'm going to move the decimal this way. To go from centimeters to millimeters, that's normally a step of 1. So I'm going to do this twice. So it's like going 1, 2. Okay? So from here, I'm going to move the decimal 1, 2 over, so 270. Now, to go from centimeters squared to meters squared, because I'm going to a larger unit, the number should get smaller. To go from centimeters squared to meters squared, once again, centimeter to meter is 2 steps, but because this is a square unit, I do each step twice. So it's like 1, 2, or what I was doing here is 1 and then pointing at the square. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I don't see the decimal, it's at the end of the number. I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4.2 meters squared. Millimeters squared to meters squared. Once again, I'm going from small unit to large unit, so the number's got to get smaller. From millimeter to meter, that's a step of 3, which means this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm actually going to move the decimal 6 places to the left. So the decimal's right here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's going to be 5.2 meters squared. Okay, now we're going to take just the natural next step with this one. We're going to convert volume units, but the volume units we're going to convert here, not going to be milliliters, and whatnot. What we're going to do here is we're going to deal with the linear values cubed. Okay, so a kilometer cubed, decameter cubed, so decameter, decameter, and then a decameter vertical, right? Now, if that last one made sense here, this should make a lot of sense. Now, every time I take a step, I'm actually going to have to do that step 3 times. So if I convert, for example, from a centimeter to a decimeter, I got to convert length, width, height. And then length, width, height if I want to go from there to the meter. So every time you would take a one step here, if it was just the meter, centimeter, decimeter, whatever, I'm going to take 3 steps. Okay, each one of these little jumps from like centimeter to decimeter cubed, that's actually a step of 3 decimal places. So we are tripling the number of steps that we take here. So from centimeter cubed to meter cubed, the unit is getting larger, so the number gets smaller. To go from centimeter to meter, that's 2 steps on this scale here, but that's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I don't see the decimal, it's right here. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's a 0.0000, whoops, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5 there, meters cubed. If we go from 5.8 centimeters cubed to millimeters cubed, we're going from larger units to smaller units, so the number is going to get larger. That's a step of 1, but now that has got to get tripled. So instead of being 1 decimal place to the right, it's going to be 3 decimal places to the right. So this will become 1, 2, 3, so 5,800. Here, if I go from centimeters cubed to meters cubed, centimeters is a smaller unit to a larger unit, so again, the number is going to get smaller. Centimeters to meters, that's 2 steps. So when we're doing it with cubic, every one of those is 3. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to the left here. So starting here at the end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 0.026 meters cubed. And now finally, and this is going to be a big one, to go from millimeters cubed to meters cubed, because the unit is getting larger, the number gets smaller. The decimal's got to move to the left. To go from millimeters to meters, that is a step of 3. And since each one of these is going to now be tripled, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 units. 9 steps here. So the decimals here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 0.0065 meters cubed. Okay, and so that's how you handle it when the type of unit gets larger. When that exponent gets larger, what that does is the exponent becomes the multiple you multiply the number of steps by that exponent. So with area, we multiplied by 2. With volume, we multiply the number of steps we take by 3. All right, now let's take a look at the imperial system, which is just another way of measuring things. So the imperial system, as it says here, is developed in England and is used by the United States. This is why it's an important one for us to use, because they're our closest neighbor, and in our interactions with them, a lot of times when we're talking about units, we need to be able to understand what each other are saying there. And besides that, in Canada, we're still kind of using the imperial system, although we are officially a metrics country. A lot of the things that we measure here, we still talk about in terms of the imperial system. A lot of us still measure our height in terms of feet and inches. A lot of us still measure our weight in terms of pounds. So it has evolved from a system used in the ancient Rome, based on reference from the human body and everyday activities. So the current emperor's foot length would be the standard unit of for measuring length. And you can see right there that like the current emperor's foot length, well, that means it's going to change. That evolves from time period to time period. That's a bit problematic. The length of the foot was then later standardized, and that's what we needed, to 12 inches. So now that makes that a more trustworthy measurement. The inch is the smallest unit of measurement in the imperial system. Measurements smaller than 1 inch are made in fractions of an inch. Okay, fractions of an inch, and that's an important thing to bear in mind here. So frequently, when you see a ruler in the metric system, what you'll see is 1 inch, and then you'll see a longer little line here, which cuts it in half. The longer lines here usually cut it into quarters, and then eighths, and then sixteenths. And oftentimes in a measuring tape, the first foot of a measuring tape has all the inches divided into 30 seconds as well. So this ruler has 16 divisions between the inches, so we measure this down. It's got a precision, okay, we'll call this a precision of 1/16 of an inch. That's the smallest unit you can measure there. So let's take a quick look, just at a couple things here. So find the measure of the following lines using the imperial ruler here. So this line here, this blue line here is 1, 2, 3, it's 4 inches. And then let's take a look here. This would be half of an inch. This would be a quarter. So right here, this lines up with 4 1/4 inches. And you can see that measurement down here. The measurement is 4 4/16. That's another way to describe it here. You just count out the smallest number here and then reduce that fraction, 4/16, to 1/4. Now, just like with the metric system, we've got a reference that we can use for the imperial system. So let's take a look here. So for the inch, and we abbreviate it as IN. That's usually the distance from the knuckle here to the tip of your thumb. Now that's not necessarily true for everybody, but that gives you a sense of how big an inch is overall. A foot length, oddly enough, is the length of a foot. And again, that's not always true. I mean, a lot of people have a foot length that's less than 12 inches, right? And that's whatever. It just gives you an idea. A yard is about an arm span or an adult pace. If you've ever gone and played like touch football out in the field someplace, oftentimes that's how we count out the yards, right? We just walk it out. And a mile is roughly the distance that you would walk in about 20 minutes. So here are the more specific conversions between the units in the system, and these are the ones that we're going to use. So for measuring distances or lengths, the units of measurement in the imperial system are inches, feet, yards, and miles. Now, there are lots of other units of measurements that are out there, but these are like your standard, most common ones. So then one of the things that we need you to be able to do will then be to convert not only within systems, but between systems. Because we're a country that is really between systems here, like I said, some of us measure our heights in terms of feet and inches. Some of us only know our heights in terms of centimeters. Okay? And so to facilitate that kind of communication, it helps to have a conversion or a way of converting between those two systems. And to do this kind of conversion here, we're going to use proportional reasoning here. So here's the steps. We're going to establish a proportion, which is 2 equal fractions, with one fraction being the conversion factor. Now this should be factor from the table. So we're going to use what we're seeing here as one of our fractions there, and then the other one is going to be it's going to be a fraction that has the measurement that we have, and then leaves a variable spot or an open spot for the value that we're looking for. And then we cross multiply and divide to solve. Okay, and sometimes the conversion factor you need is not in the table, but you can get it from the ones that are in the table. Okay, so sometimes if I'm asking you to convert, I don't know, let's say I'm asking you to convert, let's say inches to miles here. Well, we don't have that, but I can create that in kind of a step-by-step process here. But you know, it really helps to just see this done a few times. So I'm going to do some examples so that you can see what we're asking you to do. All right, so now we're going to do some questions here where we're going to convert within the imperial system. So I want to convert, first of all, 4,031 yards into miles. So what I need, first of all, is a conversion factor here that combines or compares yards and miles here. And I can see right now that 1 mile is equal to 1,760 yards. Okay, that's what I need here. So I've got 4,031 yards. What I want is miles. So I'm going to put my miles down here. I don't know what that is. So X miles here. That's going to equal, well, we just saw. Now I want yards in the numerator and miles in the denominator. So I know that 1 mile is equal to 1,760 yards. So now, how do I solve this? Well, I'm going to cross multiply. And it's going to be X times 1,760, X is going to equal 4,031 times 1. And then I'll divide, and so this is where I pull out my calculator here. So 4,031 divided by 1,760, and I'm going to get 2.29. So 2.29 miles. Next, we're going to take a look at, let's convert from feet into miles. So I've got 2,640 feet. And I want to convert that into miles. So 2,640 feet over X miles. I don't know what that's going to be. Do I have a fact up here in my table that compares feet and miles here? And actually, yes, I do. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So I will put that as 5,280 feet up in the numerator, because I want the units to be in the same relative position here, over 1 mile. Cross multiply, so that'll be X times 5,280 will equal 2,640 multiplied by 1, so I like that. And so now what I'll do is I'll divide 2,640 divided by 5,280. Oh, and I get 0.5, so half of a mile. Now I want to convert 4 miles into inches. Oh boy, okay. Well, 4 miles. Do I have a fact that goes from miles to inches? And the answer is no, I don't. But I can go from miles to feet, and then I can go from feet to inches. So here we go. I'm going to first of all convert this into feet. So 4 miles over X feet. And that's going to be 1 mile over, and we just saw this, 5,280 feet. So I'm going to cross multiply. I'm going to do that down here because I'm going to run out of room here real quick. X times 1, though, is just going to be X, and I like that. And this is going to end up being 4 times 5,280. Okay, so 21,120 inches. Or sorry, feet. We're not at inches yet. We're going to get there. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to convert that 21,120 feet into, let's do it again, X inches. Well, I know that in 1 foot, I've got 12 inches. So now I'm going to cross multiply. X times 1 will just be X. And now I've got 21,120, and I'm going to multiply that by 12. Whew, and I get 253,440. 253,440 inches. Well, I knew that was going to be big because miles are really large compared to inches. It's substantially larger. So that number had to get bigger. Up here with yards to feet, I have 350 yards. Okay, 350 yards. I want to convert that into feet. I don't know how many feet we've got. But if I look up here, I do have a nice relationship here. 1 yard is 3 feet. So up in my numerator, I'll put 1 yard, and then I'll put 3 feet down here. Cross multiply, so x times 1 is just going to give me x. And then 3 times 350 gets me 1,050 feet. Okay, so that was easy enough to do. 5 yards, I want to convert that into inches. Okay, 5 yards is going to be x inches. Don't know what that is. Do I have a conversion from inches to yards here? And yes, I do. 1 yard is 36 inches. So I can come down here and set up my ratio here, my fraction. 1 yard is 36 inches. So again, when I cross multiply, and most of my conversions this far have been really kind of user-friendly this way, because x times 1 is just x. And then I pull up my calculator here, 5 times 36, 180. So this is going to be 180 inches. And now we'll convert 5 miles into yards. So 5 miles into x yards, I don't know. But I do know, and I've seen this one already, that 1 mile is 1,760 yards. Okay? And bear in mind, when I do this, it doesn't really matter which unit I decide to put in the numerator or which unit I put in the denominator, as long as I'm the same. Because I'm going to cross multiply here in a moment. X times 1 is just x. And then I get 5 times 1,760, and we get 8,800. So that's the number of yards in 5 miles. All right, in this question, we're going to do some conversions between the systems. So to start off with, we've got 4,031 inches. We want to convert that into centimeters. Okay, so I'm going to write that as 4,031 inches over x centimeters. And now I just got to go up and figure out what the conversion is between inches and centimeters. So I look at my little chart here, and notice I've got 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters. I've got another one here too, where it goes the other direction here, but this is fine. So 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. So 1 inch, 2.54 centimeters. So I'm going to cross multiply. X times 1 is just going to be x. And I'm going to get 2.54 multiplied by 4,031. So 2.54 multiplied by 4,031. And I get 10,000. Whoops. I don't know why I wrote the 2 there. That was weird. 10,238.74 centimeters. Now down here, 2,640 feet. Okay, 2,640 feet over x meters. Now I'm hoping that I have a nice conversion between feet and meters. And I go back up here and take a look at, yeah, I do. 1 foot is 0.3048 meters. So that's good. So 1 foot will be over 0.3048 meters. And again, I cross multiply. X times 1 is just going to be x. And then it's going to be 2,640 multiplied by 0.3048. And 804.672. I probably don't need to write all those decimals down there, but yeah, why not? Okay, whoops. 4 miles over x kilometers. Okay, now I'm looking for a nice conversion between miles and kilometers. And that one is like the second one up here. 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers. So 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers. And again, I cross multiply. X times 1 is x. And then this becomes 4 times 1.609. And I get 6.436 kilometers. And then down here we're going the other direction now. Now we're going to go from meters to feet. Okay? So maybe what I'll do here is I'll use my other ratio here. So 1 meter is 3.2808 feet. 1 meter is 3.2808 feet. And what I gain by doing this is when I multiply, I end up multiplying x by 1 here, so I still just get x here, and then I've got 350, oops, make sure you can see that, 350, whoops, 350 multiplied by 3.2808. So 1,148.28 feet. I suppose I could have written them down along the side there. Anyway, we'll keep going here. Kilometers to miles, 5 kilometers over x miles. Okay, well, I got to flip back because I don't know these ones off the top of my head here. But here we go. 1 kilometer is 0.6214 miles. 0.6214. Okay, so 1 kilometer is 0.62. Oh, shoot, I already forgot. I want to say 14? Yeah, 14 miles. I cross multiply. X times 1 is x. And then I've got 5 times 0.6214. And we get 3.107 miles. Probably should be writing them over here. I give myself the space and I don't do it. And then over here, 5 inches. I want to convert that to centimeters, so 5 inches over x centimeters. Now we're back to the point where I know the inches. I probably want to grab the centimeters here. But I tell you what, just so you see an example of doing it the other way here, let's do this one. 1 centimeter is 0.3937 inches. 0.3937 inches. So in this case, it's going to be 1 centimeter is 0.3937 inches. So now when I cross multiply, I'm going to get 5 times 1, and I'm going to get 0.3937x. Well, I'm looking for x here. The way I get x is now going to be to do the division. So in most of these cases, I've set myself up nicely so I didn't have to do the division, but it doesn't matter. So now I get 5 divided by 0.3937, and I get, okay, that looks like the intention is 12.7 centimeters. And there you go. Okay, now let's take a quick look at some of these other conversions here. I want to convert 51 inches to feet and inches. Well, I'm sticking within the same system of measurement here, so that's good. 51 inches to feet. So what I've got here is, 51 inches is going to be x feet, and 12 inches is 1 foot. Now I'm going to cross multiply here, so x times 12 will equal 51. And when I divide, okay, 51 divided by 12, I get 4.25. So x is equal to 4.25. Now, feet. What that means is I've got 4 complete feet and then 0.25 of a foot. See, now the question's asking me for the inches remaining. So what I need to do here is I need to convert that remaining decimal here into inches. So I'm going to take that 0.25, this is 0.25 of a foot, and I'm going to multiply that by the 12 inches per foot. Now remember, this is 0.25 feet, 12 inches per foot. I'm actually going to go backwards, oddly enough, and convert that into inches. So 0.25 times 12, 3. So that means I had 4 feet with 3 inches left over. Now look what happens when we convert 51 inches, same question here, to yards, feet, and inches. Okay, well, a yard is going to be 3 feet. Now, this one here I can actually do without having to go through this whole process here, because watch this. I've got, when I converted 51 inches into feet and inches, I got 4 feet, 3 inches. Well, that 3 inches is not going to produce another yard for me, so that's not what I have to worry about here. It's this 4 feet. Well, there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So with 4 feet, I clearly have 1 complete yard. Now just think about it. If I was to divide 4 by 3, I would get 1 with a remainder of 1. And then I wasn't even considering the inches there. So this 4 feet, 3 inches is the same as 1 yard, 1 foot, 3 inches. So now let's do something very similar here with 23 inches. Remember, that little symbol right there is going to be inches here. So 23 inches is how many feet and how many inches? Well, let's convert that. 23 inches is x feet. Well, there are 12 inches in 1 foot. I'm going to cross multiply, so 12x is going to equal 23 times 1. And then I'm going to divide 23 by 12. So I know for sure that I'm getting 1 complete foot, and then I've got this remainder left over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the 1 from that. And now I got to figure out how many inches this is. Because remember, this is in feet. I've got 0.916 repeating of a foot there. So I'm going to multiply this by 12, okay, because there are 12 inches in a foot. I'm going to figure out what fraction of 12 that is. Or sorry, I know what fraction of 12 it is. I want to figure out what that value is, and it's 11. So that's 1 foot, 11 inches. And actually, when I think about it, that makes sense, because I know that 2 feet would be 24 inches, and so I'm 1 inch less. If I wanted to convert 4 feet, 5 inches into inches, I've already got the 5 inches there. That's awesome. What I need to do is convert that 4 feet into inches. Well, 4 feet is x inches. I know there's going to be 1 foot is 12 inches. So I cross multiply, so 1 times x is just going to be x, 4 times 12 is 48. So I know that 4 feet is 48 inches. And now I'm just going to add that additional 5 inches that I had left over, and 48 plus 5 is going to give me 53. So 4 feet 5 inches is 53 inches. Okay, and actually, that makes total sense, because when I go back up here to question 3, when I had 51 inches, I converted that to 4 feet 3 inches. This is just 2 more inches than that. Let's take a look at one more question here. And this question says that Ben buys baseboards for a bedroom. Oh boy. Ben buys baseboards for a bedroom. The perimeter of the bedroom, excluding the closets in the doorway, because you're not going to put baseboard across the closet or across the doorway, is 37 feet. What is the length of the baseboard needed in yards and feet? So we just want to convert 37 feet into blank yards, blank feet. Okay, well, 37 feet is x yards, and there's going to be 3 feet per 1 yard, so I'm going to cross multiply, so 3 times x will equal 37, and then I'm going to divide, okay, so it'll be 37 divided by 3, and I get 12.3 repeating. Okay, so I know that I'm going to have 12 yards there, 12 yards. Then, what I got to do is I got to convert that remaining decimal into feet here. Now remember, this number is in yards. I'm going to take off the 12 so that all I'm looking at is that fraction of a yard that's left over. And I know that there should be 3 feet in a yard, so I'm going to multiply that fraction, that, if you will, if you want to think of it like that, it's like a percentage almost of a yard. I'm going to multiply that by the 3 feet that I would expect, and I'm only getting 1 foot. So 37 feet is 12 yards and 1 foot. Now, if baseboards are sold by the yard and cost $5.99 per yard, what is the cost before taxes? Now, I want you to think about this. If you've got to buy it per yard, how many yards do you have to buy? And the answer is it's got to be 13 yards. You've got to buy 13 yards. Even though I only need an extra third of a yard, I need to buy 13 yards, at least. Okay, and based on the way things go when you're cutting them and whatnot, you probably need to buy more than that, quite honestly, but at least 13 yards. Because they won't let you buy fractions of a yard, so am I going to have some excess? Yep, and that's just the way that goes. So now, we're going to take 13 yards and multiply that by 5.99, and it's going to cost us $77.87 before taxes. Okay, so I hope that gives you some clarity on how we work with the imperial system and the metric system.